Hi, good morning to Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotion. Here with Pastor Amanda. I was just plugging away at planning confirmation and lost track of time this morning. But you know what? I remembered. So here we are. We're in chapter 18 now of the Gospel of John. And this is where things start, kind of really getting rough for Jesus and his disciples. And so, what we find at the very beginning of chapter 18 is the betrayal of Jesus. And so, I love that it says that he took his disciples to the garden where they met often. So we recognize very quickly in here that Jesus has been teaching his disciples the same spiritual practices he himself observes. So like in Luke, we know that he went off to the wilderness all the time to pray, and he was always taking that time. But here we recognize that he's also teaching his disciples that you got to get away. You got to have this time. And isn't it beautiful that Jesus always in John, goes to a garden to pray? It's that same garden we see in Genesis, and it's that same garden we see in Revelation that's kind of like creeping in to help us understand that this is cohesively part of all of the creation history. So Jesus prays in the garden, and we have the Garden of Eden, and then we have the garden when Jerusalem comes down from heaven, and they all kind of meet in this sweet moment. So what's also notable about this is that Jesus is also aware that Judas will know that this is where he is going to be. And so it points out that he's aware that his betrayal is about to come. It says in verse 4, knowing all that was to happen to him. That was Jesus. And he's preparing himself for this betrayal. And it's interesting that even when Judas comes and a little bit of violence breaks out, Jesus says, stop the violence. No more violence. And so he has this way of approaching his own death and a sense of betrayal. But how often do we can't even forgive somebody who's betrayed us? And here Jesus is like, I will go with you into this. It's pretty intense, but it makes us think, this is Jesus's example for us. And then we have this next little sandwiched kind of experience of Peter. He's been told by Jesus already that he's going to deny him. But Peter's like, no, I would never deny you. And so as Jesus is being taken off to the high priest's house, it says that Peter and another disciple, and we don't know who this disciple is, just another disciple, and the other disciple gets to go in with Jesus into the inside court, and Peter is left standing at the gate. And I had never really read that, I don't think, before. I'm not sure I ever comprehended that Peter wasn't allowed to go in. And it took this other disciple to come out and get him at the gate and bring him inside of the court. So it's interesting. He has fully made himself known that he is connected with the disciple who's been with Jesus. And yet here, in between Jesus's questioning and everything, he actually makes his denial. And it's just so interesting. I wonder how often that we just don't even recognize the things that we deny. And yet the evidence is piled up all around us that we are part of something or that we're doing something. And then we just flat out deny it. Because here he is. I mean, the disciple, everybody watched it happen. And yet he still says no. And I mean, I think what I also think a lot about today is, all of the fact checking that we have to do these days, because you can have all this evidence and people will still absolutely deny what is right in front of them. It's scary, but we see how it happens. It happens right here. Peter is with the disciples, and yet he says, nope, I'm not one of them. The facts didn't matter in that moment. And this is just, you see everything that, like Jesus says, I have worked so hard to make you my disciples. And then they just fall to pieces here at the end. We have this beautiful kind of little interlude with Pilate. And as I've talked in previous times when we've talked about Pilate, he very much sees Jesus as a non-threat. And he's very much like, you're kind of a cool guy. Like, that's fine. And yet he still bends to the pressure of the religious leaders. And as I was kind of doing some of my research, and this is what every country struggles with, is when the Jewish leaders bent to the will of the emperor. They pretty much said, we'll do whatever the emperor wants so that we can get what we want. They didn't consider what God wanted. And so they bowed to the state instead of to God in these moments by asking for Barabbas to be released instead of Jesus. They wanted Jesus crucified. And you know how dangerous that is. What happens when religious leaders begin to bow to the state without considering what God would really have happen? Kind of makes you stop and think. What are we being called to? Are we being called to bow to Caesar? Or do we need to realign ourselves to be bowing to God? And we just, that's what's pushed at us right now. I mean, the question is, what is truth? We have Judas's betrayal. We have Peter's denial. We have Pilate saying this man is not a danger. And we have the Jewish leaders saying that he is a problem. What is truth? Makes us tickle our brains today. That's what it is. And so it ends, this chapter ends with Barabbas, the murderous insurrectionist, is the one who is let loose. And Jesus, as we'll find out tomorrow, is going to be walked to the cross. And we are called to ask ourselves today, what is truth? Thanks for joining me, Pastor Amanda, with Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotion. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.